Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Davila, a former council member of the City of Berkeley, founder of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. And welcome to the Climate and the Prison Industrial Complex. Usually we have Karina Gould here to do a land acknowledgement. We're waiting for her to arrive. Doesn't seem like she's going to, so
I'm
I'll
here.
just read it. Oh,
Oh, she's here.
oh, yeah, yeah, I didn't see you. Okay. Thank you, Karina. So go for it. Please do what you do so greatly. Let me introduce you properly, though. I'm sorry. Uh, yes, I get a little thrown off on these things. This is like the fifth year that we've been doing this, but I still get nervous. It's just a thing. So Karina Gould is the tribal chair of the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and Ohlone. She is an indigenous activist and organizer that has worked in preserving and protecting the ancient burial sites and her ancestors in the Bay Area for decades. She's the co-founder and lead organizer for the Indian People Organizing for Change and co-founder of Segurite Land Trust, an urban indigenous women's community organization working to return and to land to indigenous stewardship in San Francisco's East Bay. And congratulations, Karina, land back. The Shale Mound on 4th Street in Berkeley is now back in the hands of Segurite. So thank you, Karina, for being here. The Ohlone people have their land back. Thank you, Berkeley, for doing that. Take it away, Karina.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Hello, relatives. It's so good to be back home. I just got in yesterday. I was doing some work with some beautiful people in Utah and got to be there and there in the Ute territory in the last few days. And so the first thing I did, one of the first things I did when we got home was to go to the West Berkeley Shell Mill. And so just wanted to thank you all for all of your amazing support and prayers and showing up and standing up with the LaShawn people to ensure that she's freed forever. And I just really want to thank you, Cheryl, for all of the years of support that we've been working on this project together to ensure that the Shell Mound is safe. And I'm beyond words. And so today, when we're doing this opening for this, we think about the prison industrial complex, and it makes me think about my own ancestors that what I call was imprisoned at the first prison industrial complex of California, the Missions. And as we begin to think about it, my ancestors on this land were forced to build their own prison systems, and people across the world are being imprisoned in places, open air prisons and prisons that they're forced to deal with. And so we also have to think about those people that are imprisoned behind the walls that we can't see, the walls of addiction and the walls of depression and so many other things. And so we have to expand our minds of what prisons are and how we as human beings can work to stop these things from happening. And so together we come together, we know that we can fight and we can win, just like we won the Shell Mound. That when we put aside everything else, our egos and those things that don't matter, that we can actually make those changes. And so today, I want us to take these deep breaths together to know that our people will be free. And so we take a deep breath and hold it, and we let it go. And we woke up this morning, and so we thank our Mother Earth for holding us up, for the sun to be shining out there today, for our relatives that have waken up with us, for our minds that are free to openly think, for our hearts to have courage. We take a deep breath and hold it, and we let it go. And we're going into springtime. We see all of the new things that are popping up and all the beautiful rains that we were able to receive that nourished not only us as human beings, but all of the plant life and all of those that fly in the sky and those that have four legs. And we give thanks for the springtime that is coming, a time of new growth, the time of new beginnings, the time of fresh ideas. And we thank them, the plants that are coming back, that's going to bring us foods and medicines. And we thank the earth for continuing to do, and all of those that are on this earth that continue to do their ancestral callings. And we take a deep breath and we let it go. Take a deep breath today for all that is sacred around the world, our bodies, our minds, our Mother Earth, the air, the waters, the fires. We ask our ancestors to come and stand with us and to hold us up from below and in front of us, on the sides of us, above us, and behind us, so that we may also do our ancestral callings, the callings of the work that needs to be done on this earth, so that the next 7 generations can have a better life. Those yet to be born can have a better life than we have today. And we take a deep breath and we hold it and we let it go. And this final breath, we ask the air to come in and to cleanse our bodies, our minds, our spirits. And we pray for anything that ails us or anybody that we love. So we take a deep breath, hold it, and let it go. Thank you so much for being here in this space and time. I pray that all of you have a wonderful day, a good meeting, and a great rest of your weekend. Thank you, Cheryl. Love you.
Thank you, Karina. I love you too. So welcome everyone. That's always such a blessing to have Karina start us off on at these virtual summit series. It's always a blessing to be in her presence. So welcome to the Climate and Prison Industrial Complex, the CEMTF's fourth virtual summit series. Of the whole title of the series is Climate Social Justice, Rights to Nature, United Actions for a Just and Regenerative Future. Some of you may know that I'm Cheryl Davila, founder of the CEMTF. I'm also co-founder of the Berkeley Equity Summit, and part of all these different organizations, Friends of Adeline, Mobilize Berkeley, the Interfaith Council of Alameda County, the Network of Elected Officials. And now I've just recently got elected to the KPFA local station board. And I've been continuing to be out on the streets to end the genocide and the occupation and to be in solidarity to free Palestine. Here we are today for climate and the prison industrial complex. And I want to thank you all for being here. Thank Jack and Karina, who are the steering committee members, and our amazing fellows, Natalie, Livy, Janelle, and Karis, who has been working with CEMTF since the fall of 2023 and are still working with us this semester. And I want to thank all the speakers today, Karina, Malachi, Minister King, Ashley, James, Madam Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price, and Carrie. And I want to thank you all for being here. We are in some interesting times, and we know that, the climate is a region of the earth having specified climate conditions, or it's the average course of the condition of the weather at a place, usually over a period of years, as exhibited by temperature and wind velocity. And we also know that climate can be just the atmosphere in the room or outside, right? So here we are today, and we know that I'm sorry, I can't, lost my place here. That the prison industrial complex, I saw on Critical's Resistance.org states that the prison industrial complex is a term to use to describe the overlapping interest of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic and social and political problems. Though its reach and impact, the prison industrial complex helps and maintains the authority of sorry, the authority of people who get their power through racial, economic, and other privileges. So ponder that while we listen to our amazing speakers. We're in a heap of trouble, and the heap keeps getting larger and larger. We have the atrocities of the prison industrial complex, the climate crisis, and number 45, the ex-president unleash the supremacy that's been locked up in the closet, but actually out in the open, but not as obvious, and unleash the fascism, the racism, not to mention the catastrophes from the fires and the flooding and the heat. And let's not forget COVID, because that's still among us. And homelessness is still rising, as is the mental health crisis, the fentanyl crisis, and now we're living through a genocide. So sit back, get your coffee, your tea, relax, get your breakfast, and Natalie is going to introduce our next speaker. Natalie is one of our UC Berkeley College Core Fellows. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you guys can hear me all right. I'm really excited to hear from our speakers today and excited to introduce our first speaker, Gary Malachi Scott. They are from the Reentry/Community Restorative Justice Coordinator, and in the Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. Please take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for having me. It's definitely good to be able to be back, like speaking around the area of mass incarceration and the impact of the prison industrial complex. It's been a minute for me, but I'm thankful to be here. Um, my presentation, I called it Rivers in the Desert, and it's actually named after one of my wife's beautiful songs that she have on her album, Cipher. And so, and it just made me think about the locations of many California prisons, or maybe prisons throughout the United States, and how do we survive? How do we be in community with one another to be able to survive? And that's why I kind of connect the water to. And so yeah, so her album is on Spotify, Apple Music, all the platforms, Cipher. So I just want to honor her too. But yeah, my presentation, I'm not going to have any slides. I'm going to be doing mostly storytelling. And if time permits, give a little opportunity for questions and answers. And thank you, Cheryl, too, for how you opened this up. And you definitely made me think a lot a bit more about where are we right now, especially with the social climate and everything that's going on when it comes to prisons and climate. And it seems to me, a lot of formerly incarcerated people, we feel like there's a shift happening to we're kind of moving back on. I'm sorry to say this. It seems like we're moving back to a tough on crime era. I'm not even saying that things now are the greatest, or things a couple of years ago were the greatest. We had some strides in the California system around juvenile justice reform, and with SB 260, SB 261, and all the other Senate bills that came out that allow for people that were sentenced under the age of 18, even under the age of 23, to have a reasonable chance of parole, and people are paroling. And with the amendment to the 3-strike law, where people have gotten out, not everybody, we needed to do a lot more around it. And so a lot of people have coming out. There was a shift, but during, Trump and the pandemic and all the rhetoric that is going on, it seems like it's kind of moving back in that direction. And it seems like people who we may have thought that were on the left are really in the moderate or on the right. That's kind of like what it coming to seem. The distinction between red and blue is kind of blurry to me now. What I'm noticing out here in the world with district attorneys being recalled because they're trying to really push for restorative justice and healing and really do things better. So that just what came up for me, Cheryl. So I hope you don't mind me sharing that part. But I definitely want to get into some storytelling about. I'm actually going to talk about the way that the climate actually impacted me and other people that I witnessed during my time of incarceration. And so yes, my name is Malachi. I was just to get to it. I was actually tried as an adult at the age. I was arrested at 15, tried as an adult. I was facing over 60 years to life in prison, and I ended up taking a plea bargain for 15 years to life. I was arrested in 1998. By the time in May of 2000, that's when I was sentenced. So I was literally sitting in juvenile hall for almost 2.5 years. I was transferred every time I went to court. I was transferred from the juvenile hall on a little van to Los Angeles County Jail, and then to the courthouse, back to Los Angeles County Jail, and then back to juvenile hall. And that was my process. But about the time I made it to prison, I was actually 18 when I hit my first prison yard. I've been to 4 prisons. I started with North Kern State Prison, Calipatria State Prison, Corcoran State Prison, and then I finished at San Quentin for my last 5 years. And so I'm just going to start with some storytelling around that. My first main placement was Calipatria State Prison. When I got off the bus, when I first got there, I was made to push the cart with people's property. I was asked to push the cart, and so I definitely did that. But it was so hot that I really couldn't even look in the sky. And growing up in Los Angeles, the hottest it probably got, if I remember correctly, maybe like 102, right? And so when I got off the bus, it was around 117 degrees, and I can literally see the heat waves. So I had no idea on the climate of the prisons. I never really thought about that. The next day I went to the yard for the first time when everybody was outside, and I literally couldn't stay on the yard for an hour. I had to go back inside because it was so hot. My body started shaking and I was sweating. And this is an adjustment prison that people have in certain prisons throughout California, and I would imagine beyond, because California isn't the hottest. So I would imagine. I had my first mild heat stroke at Calipatria State Prison when I went outside. I was throwing up. I was like hyperventilating and sweating, and I didn't really know what it was at that time, but we kind of figured that out. It was a mild heat stroke. On that prison yard, with my own eyes, I've witnessed people fall out because of the heat. They would go out, on the yard, people want to do activities. So there's basketball happening, there's people exercising, and there's a lot of people who love their coffee. So they still drink coffee even though it's hot. And I definitely witnessed people fall out, and the cells will often get so hot that the walls would sweat. And we used to have to put our towels in the sink, wet it, and lay it on our chests or fan it so water can come out, right, and cool us down. So I'm only really kind of setting this up to just give you a visual of what it's like to be in a prison that is overcrowded and we have to deal with the elements, but not too much to say about the elements and how we deal with it. When I moved to Corcoran State Prison, so I spent my first 6 years at Calipat. When I moved to Corcoran State Prison, this is where I learned about valley fever. I know Corcoran, Pleasant Valley, Avenal, a lot of the Central California prisons deal with valley fever. Thankfully, I never got it, but a lot of people would get it, and some people didn't make it in those conditions. And so that's a little bit about the climate at Corcoran. And when you see the heat, there's articles that you can go on and Google right now and kind of learn how the heat impacts people. Out of 33 prisons, I'm not for sure where we are now with it, that most of them are actually located in the desert. We have a few that's probably on the coast. San Quentin is around, is in the Bay. We have San Luis Obispo, California Men's Colony. I've never been to Chino. I like to imagine that maybe that's in a location that it doesn't get too hot. I can be wrong with that, but most of them are. And these are the kind of we have to deal with the elements, the overcrowding, and it's beyond that. And if you think about the summertime, a lot of times in the urban community, when summer comes, we'll say to ourselves, be careful because it's going to get dangerous because of the way that the heat impacts people around anger and aggressiveness. And so if we say that on the street, I can only imagine what happens in the prisons. And I actually witnessed these things. There's an actual article of a California woman in a California, I think it's Chowchilla, where a woman actually died due to the heat. And I'll just read it real quick, just the headline per se. Okay, I'm missing the headline, but it talks about how California prisons there's this big heat wave that is happening. Pretty much last year during the summer, and if you think about it too, in the heat wave, there were also the pandemic where a lot of people, they were on lockdown, they were being quarantined, and a lot of people was actually dealing with COVID and people passing away. And I know a few people myself. So you have all of these different moving parts that impacted people. It got better for me individually once I got to San Quentin. When I got to San Quentin, I was able to see green from the yard of San Quentin. You can see Mount Tamalpais, which became like a symbol of freedom for most incarcerated people that were inside. We will often say, when I get out, I'm gonna go hiking right there and I'm gonna look down at San Quentin. And that was something I was able to do. My first year out, I actually have a video on Facebook that has it. My first year out, I went on a hike up there with some friends. And just to mention, Shiro, your son was there. He went on a hike with me to honor that 1 year out phase. And we did a ceremony around the people who are incarcerated in San Quentin. In San Quentin, we were able to like see the bridge. We were able to see cars. We were able to see a lot of parts of nature that we weren't able to see. We were in other prisons. In level 4 prisons, you only get 1 to 2 hour, you only get 1 to 2 hour yard time. There was no night yard in level 4 prisons, so you rarely got to see the stars. Level 3, you're able to get night yard and see the stars. And a lot of people often say, I want to get to a level 3 just so I can see the stars. And that was it, just to be outside at night. And you can only imagine what it was like for people who are in the SHU program, the segregated housing units, people who barely got any yard, and the impact of that, or just having that human contact. And so these are some of the conditions that we lived in. And just to go a little bit further more into it, and this is what I like to share what prison was like for me. And I don't just want to make it all about prison right now, but I know that's what we're talking about. on certain prison yards, I like to tell people, if you've been to San Quentin, do not judge San Quentin in a way that is compared to other prisons. Other prisons really have it challenging, especially the level 4 state prisons. So what I often share is, imagine prison is like a box. And in that box, you put gangs, drugs, authority, racism, capitalism, all of these different isms inside of this box. And every now and then it is shaken up. And it gets shaken up at different moments where people want to have contact with their families. People want to experience something that is good that they can hold on to. And so when we talk about mass incarceration or ending mass incarceration, just know that it is very important to be able to continue with the movement. Because I remember when I came home, it was a lot of talk about ending mass incarceration, and it's not enough. I feel like it's not enough as it used to be. And so I'm really thankful that you all are bringing this back to the forefront and continue this conversation and thinking about today's social climate when it's shifting back to tough on crime, and that we can continue the conversation. And not only continue the conversation around mass incarceration, but we just know that it's also connected to white supremacy, the same white supremacy that is impacting Palestine right now and impacting other parts of the world right now, Congo, Sudan, and other, and here in the United States and beyond. So this connection, when we talk about climate and mass incarceration, is really connected to many different things. And so we definitely have to focus on a lot of other different things. So I do get it on how we're shifting and speaking about other things too, but I'm glad that it's coming back around. If we can connect them all together, perhaps we can have more movement to true healing, true freedom, and true life, joy in life, to be able to get to the place that we want to get to. That's just, I'm pretty sure I wanted to speak about other things, but I definitely want to open it up for Q&A. I want to open it up for people who have comments, that can just bring out anything else that I've already said or things that I've pretty much left out. So yeah. So sure,
I see
other,
Ben has his hand raised. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you all. Can you hear me?
yep.
I super appreciate you talking. I know it's hard to go back there sometimes. Can you talk about if your support network had to travel to come see you? And can you also talk about the food in prison? I don't really know what the food looks like, and not the commissary, but like the institutional food in prison. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, the prisons are in the middle of nowhere. My family didn't really have a lot of the means to be able to come visit me all the time. So I got visits, uh, maybe like in my first few years, it was like maybe 3 visits. And it was definitely a long, they had to drive 4 hours, over 4 hours to actually get, I think it was 4 hours to get from Los Angeles to Calipatria State Prison. And so my mom had to get all of my younger siblings in the car and pretty much get them there. So I didn't see them much. When I got to Corcoran State Prison, I saw them for my first year every other week because it was a lot closer. And then when I got to San Quentin, I only got like probably 2 visits while I was there because it's so much further away. I went to San Quentin for the college program. I knew that at that time when I decided to go to the college program as a lifer, remember I was a lifer, no one was going home with life sentences at that time. All the governors would not let any lifer go home. But I went there still because I just really felt like it would still give me some hope, give me an opportunity to get further my education, because other prisons, all they had was, well, also all they offer were the ability to obtain your GED, and they had Alcoholic Anonymous. That was it for as programs. Maybe there were programs, other prisons with some programs, the ones that I was at, they had AA and the education program to get your GED. I already had my GED, so I was on a status where where I had to wait in line to get a job for my first 6 years, and I never got a job for my first 6 years in prison. And so And so that's just a little bit about, I don't know why I got there. That's just a little bit about that. Um, the food in prison, yeah. We often call the some of the food like mystery meat you would hear. Um, a lot of people prefer to eat what they got in the canteen. But also a lot of people couldn't afford canteen. They had to go to the chow hall to be able to eat. They had to ask people for support that was already inside. I often had to do that sometimes too. I had friends that I would ask for support when I didn't really have anything. Um, they had these different, it was just, I don't even know how to describe it to you. I think you can pretty much Google it, but it wasn't the best food. Every now and then it was edible. Some people would go and eat, but it definitely wasn't the best. It definitely wasn't enough, I would say, and the nutritional value was very limited, pretty much. They had to pay in bulk for how many people? 140,000 people, and develop contracts with food companies that were the cheapest in order to feed so many people. So it definitely wasn't the best. The package system shifted when I went to prison. My first 2 years, I was able to get packages from my family. They would go to the store, put the food in a box, and ship it to the prison. And then the prisons decided, you know what? We're not allowing packages anymore from families. We're going to allow your families to go through a vendor, and these vendors had contracts with CDCR, and so therefore these vendors to CDCR benefited financially from shifting it to families creating a box to families having to order from vendors. And we've seen a number of things that happen like that with the prison system and their contracts with Global Tel and other and Pacific Bell, all the phone companies, right? And how much money they used to make. Thankfully, there have been some organizers who organized around it, and now the phone. I'm hearing that the phones are not expensive. The phone calls are not expensive, or there's probably no cost now. I'm not sure. Somebody can correct me on that. I've been home for 10 years now, so I know things have shifted. And so you started to see that CDCR moving in ways that is about built on capitalism versus family. Any way that they can do it. And so yeah, hopefully some of that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard, the food is really super, super, super bad. No nutritional value. There's not clean water. Can you talk about the water and like maybe the access to like showers and things like that? And
Wow,
if
y'all
that got
asking some good
impacted
questions.
by the, yeah.
Yeah, different prisons, the water is different in certain prisons. It's kind of hard to tell, but I do definitely see chemicals coming out of the water. And I believe it's some sort of chlorine or something to kind of help clean the water as it comes out. And so you see things floating at the top sometimes, not knowing it's probably just something that's supposed to clean the water. And so a lot of times people didn't want to drink from the sink. People will boil their water and let it cool down. Um, the showers, obviously, it's a during lockdowns, you were able to shower every 72 hours. Well, non-lockdowns, you were able to shower every day, but you have to wait your turn. And remember, the prisons are, especially at this time, was segregated, and so you had the blacks and Asians showering on one side, and you had the whites and the Mexicans showering on the south side, specifically showering on the other side. So you had a political divide, and it was high respect too, because no one wanted any racial riot to happen. And so you often sharing showers, waiting your turn. You're in the shower together with other people. And there are some prisons where you in the shower with a lot of people at the same time, and the drainage is so bad that the water comes up to your ankles as you shower with other people in the same shower. And so it was definitely wasn't sanitary at all. And so that just, yeah. And please keep track of time for me too. I don't want to take anyone's time. And if there's another room for another question, that's fine.
You're doing well. And actually the next speaker, I don't see that person online here. So that's hopefully they'll show up. But Does anybody else have any more questions? I don't see any more hands raised. Oh,
Yeah.
Naomi, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Hi, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And well, I've heard a little bit about the physical health and like the conditions there, but talking about mental health, what did you do or what did people do to just kind of like get through the day, have hope? Yeah, what did you do in terms of mental health, if anything?
Oh, personally, man, I'm very, very thankful that I was able to I just had hope throughout my incarceration. There were times where I felt like I probably would never get out. I would question would I ever get out again, but for the most part, I held on to hope. And so for me personally, I definitely read a lot. The first 6 years I was on lockdown, half of those years because of the things that happened. And so I was reading a lot, reading the Bible, reading other books, getting my knowledge up. I love sports, so I used to have a radio. Actually, listen to sports on the radio, which is old school. A lot of people like to watch sports, but I was able to listen and watch sports when I could. And a lot of people just stayed in certain activities, whether it's playing games. When the yard was up, you had the chapel program. People played basketball and sports. For the little yard that they got, and things got better once you get from a level 4 to level 3. You're able to do more and more. So eventually, when I got to San Quentin, man, it really was. San Quentin is pretty much, to me, I feel like it's more of a prison that is closer to a healthy reentry program than other places. And so when I got to San Quentin, they had the college programs where I got my AA degree at. They had a restorative justice program, how I got first involved in restorative justice, and I'm doing it now. They had the San Quentin newspaper, so I became the sports editor and interviewed athletes I used to watch on TV. Amongst other, there's so many programs at San Quentin, I don't even know them all, and I was there. And so just that sort of activity definitely kept me moving towards a place of hope. And then I saw the first lifer go home, the eyewitness go home. And that really shift things, right? And then I saw the second lifer go home. Because you have to remember, we didn't see lifers go home. That was pretty much a blanket policy. And so to be able to witness it gave a lot of people hope. And now there's thousands of lifers home in the state of California. And just to let you know, the recidivism rate is less than 1% for people who had life sentences. So yeah, I definitely had hope. And no matter what people go through, and we can see it, the communities are developed in the harshest of times. People come close together in harshest of times. People rely on each other. And that's also something that I witnessed through lockdowns, people talking to themselves, fishing, sharing food. When the heat was going on, people made sure that, do you got water? Do you got food? Do you need an escort to the infirmary or to the building? There was definitely support. And these are the rivers that I said that's in the desert. We definitely had opportunities where we came together and showed up for one another. And so you can find a brother, or if you're in a women's prison, a sister, or however they identify, like really people that deeply care and look after you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, then there's Austin and then Ben.
Okay, hey Malachi, thanks for all of your information and your stories. I just had a quick question. So I kind of put some of it in the chat when you were talking about the food in prison, right? And so when I was in the service, we we did actually eat that same food. We loaded it on. And I don't know if you guys ever see the boxes, but it says straight up on the side, right? And that's like I said in the chat, by the California Department of Corrections. And so we would open it. It would be like some of it would be rotted. Maybe like 75% of it was salvageable. That doesn't mean it's like super edible, right? And so what that would cause is like an onslaught of gastro, right? And so that would spread throughout, the whole unit or the whole command. And especially if we're out on a deployment, right? We're pretty much I was on the Ronald Reagan, so they called it Cell Block 76, right? And because it felt like that. And we were out in the middle of the ocean for 6 months at a time. And so we bring on this food. this gastro spreads and the infirmary or medical is just overly crowded. And so I guess my question to you after saying all that is how would you guys deal with that outbreak of gastro issues because of the rotting food that you had no choice but to eat?
Quarantine. If things start to spread, the quarantine us all. We had the neurovirus sweeping through for a few times, where people would get dehydrated, start throwing up, and doing other things that I don't want to speak about on this call. And they would just literally quarantine us, and they would come in. They would have to feed us themselves to the slot, and just wait for everything to pass, and probably wait 2 weeks after the last sort of case or person who had it passed away before they let us come back up. And so oftentimes what people would they would say man down to get the attention of the guards to go to the hospital or the infirmary there. They would just come and just take them out pretty much. And yeah, it was sad. We actually had probably about last time I experienced that, we probably had like 2 people pass away, two other elder people who probably had other conditions as well, pass away because they got the neurovirus and they were just dehydrated.
Right. So if I may follow up on that, what do you think the reason for them continuing to serve, people like yourself and people like me this food, even though we know the effects of these outbreaks of the norovirus?
The cheap, it's all about capitalism. How much can we make and how much can we save? And we have to feed X amount of people, and let's give them the cheapest possible so we continue to benefit. Um, and so that's the only thing that I can come up with. And this, we're talking about prisons here, y'all. We haven't even talking about the county jails throughout California. And so I think what you're saying here, it also applies to the county jails as well, where there's a lot of people and there's definitely amount of cheap food to be able to save to keep the budget low. And so, and whatever they do with the rest of the money that they continue to have, I have my imagination where it goes. Um, but I just think it's I don't think the people really care too much, to be honest.
Thank you.
At least people that are in
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you.
Ben has a question.
Yeah, I was curious if you knew any of the incarcerated firefighters. I know you got out 10 years ago, and the big California fires started becoming an issue kind of after that. But I was wondering if you could talk about that, or if you knew anyone or about that program.
I didn't know anyone 10 years ago. I know someone now. He was a part of one of the groups that we co-founded. He actually trained people to be able to go fight the fires now. Um, so I don't have much to say about that, but what I do know is that the people that were involved in these camps weren't really getting paid either at all or very, very minimal. And they will often have to go out to fight these extreme fires in California that's very dangerous. And once again, that's part of the prison industrial complex. You're able to pay people pennies, just like I was paid 30 cents an hour to make chairs, to fight fires out, where it's very pretty much dangerous. And I don't know if there's been any reform around that. I did hear about certain things happening, but I heard people getting paid up $1 or $2 a day fighting fires. So here we are once again. Whenever you're able to pay somebody under minimum wage to do things that people would get minimum wage or more for, to me that's part of capitalism, surplus value, and it definitely connects to the prison industrial complex. And so from the firefighters to the people who are the cooks to the people who sweep up the floors, or people like me who was a part of the PIA prison industry, making chairs. I got paid 30 cents an hour. Person on the street probably got $17 an hour. I don't know. And so it's definitely all connected. But those are extremely dangerous. Me personally, I don't think I would sign up for something like that. But there are those who decide that they want to get in it. And the sad thing about that is they can fight fires to save our lives, to save nature. Like, they make sure that things don't spread, but they can't come back to the city and get a job for the fire department. Yeah.
Austin, is your hand still up? Do you have another question?
No, I just forgot.
No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this, Malachi. I think we have a little predicament here because I think the next person, Minister King X, is not here. So if you want to continue and talk a little bit more, you could do that. If not, we'll figure something else out. But
I think there's some
oh,
questions.
there's a couple more questions too.
Okay.
Is that okay with you, Malachi? Do you
No,
have
it's all
time
good.
or?
It's all good.
Okay, well, maybe he'll show up. I'm not sure what happened. But Joyce and Naomi again. Joyce, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi Malika. I belong to a parish. Well, actually, I also belong to centering prayer, and I think some people in charge. One time I was asked, do I have books on centering prayer that I can donate? Because I did give a banana box, and the guy was appreciative. So, and then I thought I heard that people do have centering prayer groups in a prison. I don't know where. So I was wondering, my question is, did you have any spiritual support or activities where you were in prisons?
Oh yeah. Like I say, certain prisons are different depending on the location. I think if you were in a prison that is far away from the city, like the major cities, it's very difficult. You will often have a chaplain. You have like one chaplain, maybe two chaplains for the different groups. So you had Protestant chaplain, you had the Catholic chaplain, you had the imam, you had just different thing people come in, but it wasn't many. But there always were like services. If your services was on Sunday or Saturday or whatever day it was, they would definitely give people the right to those to be able to practice and also to have access to books that are needed. I haven't personally experienced if any like the prisons actually keeping people away from that, in my opinion. In the prisons that are closer to the city, like San Quentin, oh, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of different programs. There's Bible studies, there's prayer groups, like you mentioned, amongst other different things for other people who have their spiritual beliefs. San Quentin is definitely one of the best because it's like you can make up, no, there's no offense to anybody. People can make up something brand new and it will allow somebody to come in and help, teach this thing or whatnot. And so I feel like San Quentin was more or closer to a higher controlled support, I would say, because it's still that's because it's San Quentin and there's a lot of access to it. Don't mean that, that the powers that be don't want to have maintain control. So yeah.
Naomi?
Yes, thank you. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to highlight that in case we're going to spend more time on this, there are a couple questions in the chat.
Can you see there was a question from Jessica and yeah, so can you see those, Malachi?
I can see them. I'm trying to read through them. So Jessica, besides structural change of getting rid of the prison industrial complex, what was the support that helped you most from people or orgs during incarceration or after? Um, Yeah, incarceration, man, San Quentin definitely was the best. We had our opportunity to see actual people who it felt like they cared about us come inside that weren't prison guards or prison staff. These were actually people who wanted to come in and give back. And so to witness that after my first 10 years, nobody coming in to get into San Quentin and seeing people coming in to really give me something, other people something, it was very, very touching. And so it's the human element. Do you feel cared about after so many years of not feeling cared about, being on lockdown, not getting letters or phone calls because they were so expensive? It was really, really touching. And I feel like there's definitely like to be able to feel that community and amongst the people on the inside too. And restorative justice, the restorative justice community in San Quentin is so impactful, so deep. I can't explain it. I really can't explain it too much, but the affection of the incarcerated people amongst the people with in the restorative justice program and holding on to our vulnerabilities and the hardest thing that ever happened to us, the hardest things we ever done to other people, and to be able to hold us in that moment really make us feel cared about. We cared about each other. And I think the biggest thing for me when I got out wasn't necessarily the necessities. Yeah, I had the necessities in place. It was really that community. So when I came home, a lot of people that was a part of the San Quentin community waited for me when I got out. And that's the biggest thing I tell people. The most biggest thing that I feel like if you live it up to me, everybody that's incarcerated have their own ideas and opinions. So I don't want to put us all in a box. But for me, the biggest thing that I needed and appreciated was community. People who would invite me over for dinner, people who would invite me over to the park or and whatever thing that is going on. That really made me feel like I'm a part of community, made me want to do more and gave me the confidence that I need to be able to move on empowered because I know I'm taken care of. And so that's just me. And my first year out, I met Armando, I met a lot of other people in the community and Cheryl and whatnot. So it just definitely feels great. I was definitely I see a question about reentry programs. I was in options recovery services. Remember, I'm originally from Los Angeles. I paroled to Oakland because there were a lot of people that were from down south who decided to relocate to the Bay Area when they got out. So I knew people that was from down south that were here, but mostly the volunteers that went inside of San Quentin that were also local. And so I decided to come to the Bay Area for the first time. I was living in a reentry house on 55th and Martin Luther King, and I would often have to go to Berkeley every day to the program. So I was in that program for 1 year exactly, and I couldn't wait to get out of that program actually. So soon as I completed the next day, I was in an apartment and I was out. Um, it's not as easy as it was 10 years ago. I know there's a question about 10 years ago. When I first came home, you can get into reentry housing for 6 years. Excuse me, not 6 years, 6 months. You can extend it up to a year. Nowadays, I'm hearing that the funding isn't there, so people probably would get 4 to 6 months, and that's it. And in the Bay Area, where the cost of living is so high, that people often have to go back to LA, go back to their families. Where I didn't have to do that. I had enough time to be able to build to get to the point where I had a full-time job. Now people are getting out and they need to get a job fast. When I got out, I literally waited. I waited almost 9 months to 10 months to get my first job. I was able to readjust and move slow, enjoy life and kind of learn the different things. Remember, I went in at 15, so it was a lot of first-time experiences. It was a lot of lack of life experiences. I didn't know how to drive a car, period. I had to do that. And so I was able to take that time. Now people like, I need a job now, soon as I get out. First day I want to work. And it's pretty sad. I'm not saying that there aren't any programs that kind of support people a lot more intensively and give them that time and the space. But what I'm hearing now is not looking as good. And a lot of these reentry homes are in communities that are pretty, pretty violent. A lot of activities are going on, and that's the place that they don't want to go to because they already been in it. They grew up in it, they were in prison in it. They want to they want to step outside and not have to feel like they have to watch their back. And so it's very challenging these days from what I'm hearing.
Great. Does anybody, oh, Gabe has a question. Go ahead, Gabe.
No, I mean, not necessarily a question. I mean, I just did county time and like over 10 years ago. And so I was kind of involved with the politics inside just in Orange County. And then I'm also a PhD student right now in the criminology department at UC Irvine. And I've been teaching in prison for 6 years. And actually, like my dissertation is like about changing prison policy in California. So I can kind of like add to this 10 years thing. As far as like just legislation, like AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57 changed a lot of things for some people because people were able to get, well, they moved from, state custody to county custody. That was, AB 109, and then obviously the Prop 47, which everybody's trying to repeal right now. As Malachi was mentioning, people are trying to change that legislation because it kind of lessened the penalties for certain crimes. And then Prop 57 gave a lot of people credit for taking classes, what they call milestone credits and rehabilitative achievement credits. So you can get time off your sentence for doing those things. That's one aspect of things that have changed in the past 10 years. There was this thing called the hunger strikes, where the racial divisions between groups in prisons wasn't as prominent as the designations, because meaning, people have less favorable crimes than other people do. And they're looked down upon in the prison. There's hierarchy of criminality, right, in the prison population. So it's like a lot of people were able, like CDCR started liberally applying these things where people could leave a general population yard and go to what they call a sensitive needs yard or a protective custody yard, whether they owed drug debts or whether they just had a target on their head for whatever reason, or they're rats, or like, or the whatever it was. And so sensitive needs yards became like, I think, a third of all prison yards in California. And so CDCR said they couldn't keep these two different prison systems going. So they started putting people together in 2017 on these integrated yards, or like 180 yards or 50-50 yards, which caused a lot of violence. And a lot, there's a lot of speculation about whether that was just to create a moral panic in the community. Because if you see people rioting in prisons, then you're scared and you don't want them released. But it's like, these groups that have been separated for decades at a time being put together by the administration, and they knew what was going to happen and they did it anyways. So that's another thing that's changed. But so I've been teaching on a GP yard, a sensitive needs yard, and one of the new non-designated programming facilities. So I've been watching these changes happen, and that's what I've been writing about. So just kind of wanted to add to the 10 years change thing, because it's been, and then also this new California model that they're just kind of like ambiguously trying to implement in California. Some things are good, I think are beneficial. And as Malachi was saying, like, it's really important to remember how CDCR co-ops everything, right? Like, people go in to help, and those are the people that are helping and actually creating communities and creating like streams of reentry systems for people that are getting out. And then CDCR will take credit for it, and they'll take, send their public information officers there to be like, look what we're doing in CDCR. It's like, no, you're not doing anything. Like, it's these groups that care. And so this California model has to do with actually sending correctional officers to Norway and Norwegian countries to kind of get re-educated. I've seen it change on my yard specifically, the different yards, because I remember after COVID, a lot of the old guard left. So, and then we have some new correctional officers coming in. How that's translated, and I've seen it like in action, is that, I saw a guy in the yard that I thought might have passed away from one of my classes. And I was just like, gave him a big hug, right? Because he was alive, it's like, I'm a human and I'm happy to see that he's fine. And I was worried about him. And then, during my class, I had a counselor pull me aside and be like, you're not allowed to, that's totally inappropriate. You're not supposed to show them any kind of humanity. And I got like visibly angry, because I'm just like, sorry, this is somebody I cared about, and I'm happy they're alive. It was just, I wasn't in control of my emotions. I'm sorry, I was like very irritated. And then that I'm able now to hug people and give them high fives and fist bump and do all kinds of stuff now, which has changed, like the culture's changed. And that also has to do with the administration, like the associate warden has made it clear that it's okay to treat people like human beings now, which is disgusting and insane. So my whole goal is to get people ready to come home, and also try to get people out, as Malachi was mentioning. Not only lifers are coming home, but LWOPs, life without possibility of parole, they're coming home as well. That their sentence commuted, and there's laws that are changing. SB 94 is one of them too. And then, so that's really exciting. And we're also seeing the death row population come off the yards. Like, I have about 3 death row students in my classes right now. And that's a whole other can of worms, because they've been by themselves for a long time. And so to see them to have to acclimate, and also being around people that are like, I'm getting out in May. And then they're like, yeah, 40 million people in California want me dead. It's been very interesting. So sorry, I don't want to take up much of my time.
Nah, thank you
Well,
for
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. You wanted to say something?
No, I just really
Okay.
appreciate all the things that he just said. Like, that is
Yeah.
all those things are happening, all those things are real. And definitely bring it back to my mind. And I definitely see, I know we probably have to move on. There's another question in there about cannabis, but I don't know if you have anything to say about that, because I came home before the legalization of marijuana, so I wasn't able to see the difference of the in the prison yard at that time. But that is definitely a good question.
Can I ask a question? One more
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, Joyce.
Malachi, you mentioned restorative justice. Like I'm in San Francisco, and the Archdiocese of San Francisco has a restorative justice program. So I've gone to their conferences around September, and they have programs for education, like I think it's 5 keys. And then I said they do have people who hire people like SFM, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, for buses. They always need people for buses. So are you aware of that program? The Archdiocese of San Francisco Restorative Justice Program. So if
Yeah.
you don't know about it, Google it, because they're helpful.
Yeah, I know Julio Escobar and some others out in San Francisco. But yeah, you're definitely right. I'm glad that there's a lot of restorative justice based organizations out there, and I feel like there needs to be more, and a lot of people a lot more organizations doing it with fidelity. Just to be honest with you, restorative justice is also being co-opted, just like prison
Oh.
reform and reentry and other things. So but yeah, that I know they do good work.
Thank you, Malachi. So we're a little bit in a pickle this morning because I don't understand what's going on. Friday, it's not Friday the 13th, but it seems like we're missing a couple of folks. So if you want to say anything else, feel free because you have time. Yeah, 2 people are missing. Ashley's not here yet, as far as I can tell, as well as Minister King.
Ashley's
So,
here. Cheryl,
okay.
Ashley is here.
Okay. So,
So
all
we could maybe
right.
let
Well,
her
maybe we
start
can
early.
move on with Ashley. But thank you so much, Malachi. And the other thing I was thinking, if you wanted to, since we have a second, tell us a little bit more about the song that you named your
Oh, well, I know my
presentation.
wife was actually watching at the time. I don't want to put her on the spot though. Let me see if she's still she was watching. You know,
Yes,
she's Lebanese, and I believe the song about like when you feel like you're in a dry place, like you know, you can just tap in and find what you need. I'd rather for her explain it because it's really hard, it's really challenging.
is she still here, Naomi?
Yeah, Naima.
Hi, I was
Naima. Sorry.
not prepared to share, but that's
I
very
just put you
sweet.
on the spot. I'm
I
sorry. I'm
know.
sorry.
Oh no, that's all good. Hi, Cheryl. Much love
Hi.
to everybody. Much love to Karina, who also opened this space. So important to ground and in the land that we're on too. And Malachi, I love you. No, just real quick. This song, yeah, it's just it was rooted in it initially from a spiritual place. And in the work that also just that I do with social justice work and community on the ground work. So much of the time, and to Malachi, like your point of just like so much of the time we see deserts when it comes to transformation, and we see deserts ahead and we see deserts in front of us and behind us in terms of generational trauma, historical trauma, and what is to come perhaps, and what does it mean to be that rivers to each other, in places in dry land, in places of wilderness. And so the song is actually in Arabic and it comes from scripture, and my parents helped me translate it and come up with like a Arabic indigenous melody. And so that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you so much, Malachi, for being here. And we're going to move on to our next student, Karis. If you can, I think Karis is here, right, Jack?
It's actually
Introduce our
Janelle is
next.
Janelle is
Oh,
going to
Janelle.
introduce Ashley.
Okay, Janelle, if you can introduce Ashley, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Malachi, for taking up the space. Appreciate it. That was amazing, actually.
Yeah, just wanted to echo Cheryl right there, Malachi. Your words were super amazing. Up next, we have Ashley Chambers, the Senior Communications Associate, and Ella Baker, Center for Human Rights.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, for the invitation, and the whole team for making this space to have this really important conversation. I work with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. We have been in existence for over 25 years now, and the work that we do really centers around. It really centers around, divesting from prisons, divesting from policing, and investing in things that actually help our communities thrive, right? Which is like jobs, education, mental health support. And so that's the work that we've been doing for over 25 years. But more recently, we released a report last year around climate change, looking at like how climate change impacts, it impacts all of us. We know that, right? But it rarely when we talk about climate change does it fall into like how it impacts people that are incarcerated in California's prisons. And so we actually, I can drop a link in the chat. Yes, we actually did a report that really looked at the risks that incarcerated people face every time there is a climate disaster in California. We know there's so many wildfires that we contend with in this state. There's also like flooding that's happened in the past few years, and so all those different events, we took a look at how are incarcerated people, how are they given the tools to be prepared to respond to those climate disasters? Do they feel safe when these climate disasters are happening in their prisons? And actually, what are the protocols, right? What are the protocols for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation? What do they do in the event of a climate hazard to keep people safe inside prisons? Um, I'll drop the link in the chat really quickly. And so we did this report. It wasn't just us alone. We had some great partners who partner with us on this report, and we partnered with graduate public policy graduate students at UCLA, actually, and they were really instrumental and really amazing in making sure that we looked at the right metrics, that we had risk assessments that really looked at the full picture of what incarcerated people face and deal with inside. And they also did over 2,000 surveys of people incarcerated. We received about 500. The report looks at about 500 surveys that we received from people inside. And this was like this report was kind of a launching pad for a program that we started at the Ella Baker Center called the Emergent Policy Program. It's basically a pop-up think tank that brings together policymakers, movement partners, and partners them with current and formerly incarcerated people and systems impacted people to address a specific problem through policy innovation. And so for this project, it was looking at the impacts of climate on incarcerated folks and what policy solutions we can offer to keep people safe. And so I will share my my screen really quickly, but wanted to again just appreciate this space, appreciate the investment of your time and your resources to like really figure out solutions to the climate disasters that we know are going to continue to happen, but how we can like really make sure we're also protecting our incarcerated folks in prisons.
While we're waiting for Ashley, I just have to say Ashley comes from an amazing family. Reverend Chambers is her dad, and from the Interfaith Council of Alameda County. So thank you, Ashley. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. And I'm so excited that I'm able to present this information to you all, but also just bringing a little more awareness, like a lot of awareness around the impacts again of what incarcerated people kind of face, but also like the things that they are demanding, the things that they need in order to feel safe when a wildfire happens, or when there's flooding that's close to their prison. And so we'll jump into a few of those, a few like responses that we got directly from some incarcerated folks. The really unique thing about this report is we were able to really partner directly with some journalists that are currently incarcerated as well, and have them, they kind of amplified the report, but amplifying their own experience and voices in how we can kind of have a different lens on climate change, right? A lens that really involves and brings in experiences of incarcerated folks. And so the report, I dropped the link in the chat. You can definitely look at some takeaways and download the full report. But a few top lines from the report. It first looked at all the different prisons. There's about 34 prisons in California, and it found that 18 of those prisons are actually most vulnerable to climate hazards. And so the report looked at just four different climate hazards. Two are extreme heat and extreme cold, which we know the summers, especially in Los Angeles, can get extremely high. And for instance, looking at Chuckawalla Valley State Prison is in Southern California. There's a few others that are in Corcoran as well that experience extreme heat throughout the year. So looking at how that impacts the prisons and incarcerated folks, looking at wildfires and floods, which are most common. And so it identified like these 18 prisons are actually the most vulnerable to those climate hazards. And then I'll move into the next slide. And so we defined climate hazard as like a potential occurrence of a natural or human-induced physical event or trend that may cause like injury, loss of life, other health impacts. But in this definition of what a climate hazard is, we looked at specifically like different incarcerated folks that have medical injuries or medical needs while they're inside. They have like a need for different medications or different medical devices, looking at like what the impact is for those folks as well, especially during like wildfires, during extreme heat. Like what are the needs of folks that also have like these additional health risks, right? Like pre-existing conditions, or people that have asthma, people that are not able, are kind of disabled or in a wheelchair. The different impacts to those folks as well that are incarcerated was definitely taken into account in our surveys. And so the one other thing that I want to note, which I do not profess to be a climate expert. But what I am like, I speak very, very highly in like the impacts that this has on our incarcerated folks. The graduate students we work with from UCLA were like got to bring that climate expertise, and the expertise of how we can connect this to policy, creating policy and to legislation that can kind of help us, get to some solutions. And so they looked at, the CalEnviro screen, which, kind of measures the risk of climate hazards, throughout the state. And so they found that the CalEnviro screen actually does not include, our state prisons. It doesn't include the impacts that people in prisons can have to these climate hazards. And so it just excludes a whole community of people that are still very, very, directly impacted by these hazards, by wildfires and flooding and extreme heat. And so vulnerable communities, like people of color, low-income communities, frontline communities, we know that those communities face kind of the worst effects of climate change and are least prepared for climate hazards. But we want to make sure like that includes our incarcerated population as well. And so this is just one visual of, the CalEnviro screen. You'll see in this section here, we've highlighted that there's 3 prisons that are, at risk for extreme climate hazards. And they're in the Kern Valley area. There's so many other, like there's prisons throughout our state, right? But where they are located, where our prisons are typically located, they're in, usually like very desolate areas that are not super populated. And, it can get extremely hot. And when the temperatures fall down as well, they can get extremely cold as well, which we'll dig into like the specific experiences that people deal with during those temperature changes. But the CalEnviro screen does not even impact for, how Wasco State Prison is impacted by climate hazards. And so that's one thing that we noticed, and that really helped inform the policy recommendations that we included in this report. And if folks have questions or want to learn more, feel free to like drop it in the chat, and I'll try to get to that at the later part of the presentation. And so looking at the risk factors that incarcerated folks deal with, the report really looked at some individual risk factors, their health risks, for instance, their age. There's a big population of elderly folks that are currently incarcerated in our state. We also looked at psychotropic medications and other medications that folks have to take while they're incarcerated. And we also looked at the facility risk. So these risk factors helped us identify what prisons were most vulnerable, those 18 prisons. Overcrowding has always been an issue with CDCR, or the California Department of Corrections. And overcrowding really contributes to like the risk factor during climate hazards, but also it contributes to a lack of preparedness as well. For instance, so many folks that we surveyed shared how they were afraid, like when a climate hazard does happen, that people that live on, the kind of ground floor, people that are habitated in the ground floor of the prison, that it will be really hard to get folks out. If in the case that they needed to evacuate, it would be really hard to get folks out, especially considering people that are people that have health, different health risks, people that are disabled, the most elderly population. And so that was something that came up pretty often. But we also looked at the geographic distribution of these prisons, and how long ago these prisons were built as well, which contributes to like kind of the state of the building, if there's a need for repairs, or if the building is even set up to mitigate some of these climate hazards, right? We know that there's different things that we can do for our homes, for, apartment buildings, to kind of help set up for earthquakes, for, different wildfires and different things like that, that kind of help protect our buildings and our homes. And we found that with the age of most prisons in our state, they're not set up or prepared for any climate risks that could happen to the building itself either. And so before we jump into the policy alternatives that we presented in this report, I wanted to share, and I'm trying to make sure I stick to my time, but I wanted to share just one of our speakers, and one of our spokespeople on the report, is an incarcerated journalist, Juan Haynes, and he actually wrote a couple of op-eds around like how climate change impacts, how it impacts people inside, and so he spoke to his personal experience, and I just want to share a quick video of that with you all.
Marino Haynes, and my pronouns are he, him.
Could you share who you are and your reporting history on climate change?
Yeah, my name is Juan Marino Haynes. I've been
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I've been reporting as a journalist inside of San Quentin since about 2009. I've been a member of the Professional Society of Journalists since 2015, and so I've written for numerous publications. I've written for numerous publications dealing with climate change, beginning with Earth Island Institute. I wrote about what it's like to live in North Block. I've reported for San Quentin News on an environmental program called The Green Life, which is a environmental sustainability program inside of San Quentin State Prison, and we just focus on sustainable living practices. And I've also reported for the Science of the People and Needy Times, a small newspaper, a small publication based in San Francisco. So I've been kind of following environmental issues and climate change in prisons for an awful long time, dating way back to the Enron days when there were power shortages in the state and brownouts throughout the prison systems. And, I was in serving time in Soledad during the earthquake in 1989. And, my history dealing with catastrophes, climate change, and emergencies inside of prison go back more than 30 years.
How are you connected to the Ella Baker Center and to this report?
So the connection to Ella Baker Center is because of one person, and that's Emily Harris. We go way back, probably I'd say close to 10 years ago. We met inside of San Quentin. She attended a restorative justice symposium or program that we had, and we talked about just advocacy in the criminal legal systems the way it exists now, and a lot of the problems that we see that people are just coming to learn about. We've long been striving to make change in these areas. As far as the other part of the question is EBC, so the study itself, when the way that I get connected to this study is a colleague of mine who's editor-in-chief of San Quentin News, Steve Brooks. He wrote a piece dealing with water. And then I found out that they were interested in from that piece, I found out he was interested in what incarcerated folks thought about, these emergencies and climate change inside of prison, just preparedness, just getting prepared for any type of emergency. And that just hit home with me because I had published a couple of years ago this piece for the Science of the People called In Case of Darkness, or What to Do with Incarcerated People. And it just dealt with my long history of dealing with these emergencies that occur inside of prisons that CDCR is just wholly not preparing for. And their strategic plan for dealing with emergencies has nothing to do with how to prepare for an emergency. It's all how to react to an emergency. And the react.
And so, Juan goes on to, talk more about his participation in this study and the report, and just how, experiences like his and like his other colleagues inside often are unrecognized. And so I did want to walk through like some of the policy recommendations that we offered, and then kind of leave some space for questions as well. But we have like 3 different categories of policy recommendations that dealt with the issues that we saw incarcerated people were, bringing up as like very paramount, but also looking at how can we prevent prevent these catastrophes that happen from really impacting incarcerated folks in the most severe way, and how can we kind of take advocacy and bring some accountability for the California Department of Corrections to be a little more prepared. So our recommendations included like strategies to reduce the prison population, which would directly decrease the risk and address the overcrowding in our prisons. We also recommended some state legislation that would strengthen oversight of California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, so that they are actually having preparedness plans. And then we also looked at some approaches for addressing climate adaptation. And so a few recommendations that, to reduce the prison population was one, to reduce the population by 50,000 with a focus on like folks that are elderly, folks that have health risks and are most vulnerable to, it makes them hard to breathe when there's a wildfire or when there's, extreme heat. So folks that are dealing with, extreme health risks like that, and the elderly population. We also wanted to have like some rapid release policies, because we found in our study, and we reached out to CDCR to look at and get documentation of, what are your emergency preparedness plans when a climate hazard comes up, and there were no plans. We found that there was no way for CDCR did not prepare to have evacuation plans or any other protocols that are documented somewhere, and there was no plans communicated to incarcerated people as well. Again, we surveyed like over 500 folks that responded to our survey, and most folks were did not had no idea or no awareness of any emergency plan that existed. And so we wanted to have CDCR create rapid release policies, and require them to consider vulnerability when closing prisons. A couple other strategies as well we're again like bringing some accountability and oversight to the Department of Corrections, requiring them to produce an annual report on the number of hazards that are experienced at each prison, requiring like a environmental board to create like minimum standards for emergency plans, because we know and we've seen from the instance with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was extremely rough for all of us, right? And that experience for incarcerated folks was even more so. Like they experienced such like if they experienced loss, folks got sick, and even today, like people are still dealing with the risks of getting COVID inside, but they were to unable to distance themselves with the overcrowding issue. But we saw from the COVID-19 pandemic that CDCR was not prepared for an emergency of that magnitude. And so we've seen that there's the same risk of CDCR not having a preparedness plan for any climate hazards as well, which can lead to just extreme risks for our people that are incarcerated inside. And so the other recommendation, we wanted to update the state of California emergency plan and actually recognize that incarcerated people are part of a vulnerable community that also need to be protected and need to feel safe when we're in a climate hazard. The way we can do that is by having an emergency plan, but also making sure that incarcerated people know what is going to happen, and know what to do in the event of a climate hazard. And lastly, our other recommendations for addressing climate adaptation were to just expand the emergency preparedness training that CDCR has for staff and incarcerated people, to require them to have this training. And so everyone, including staff and incarcerated folks, are aware and know what to do. And then also reallocating funding to expand like the different measures that can be taken to expand the heating, air conditioning, ventilation, any other like measures that can be taken to keep the building in a good condition, to where folks are not also concerned about that. And so I will leave it there, and share just this quick response from another incarcerated person at Pelican Bay State Prison. Again, it was a very, very big risk for folks not knowing what would happen in the event of a climate hazard, not knowing, if they would be considered, if they needed to be evacuated. Folks were, this person was really afraid that the prison staff would close their cell door and just leave the prison. And without an emergency preparedness plan, folks are really just in the dark. And so this report really tries to get at some solutions that can like keep our people inside safe, but also like bring some accountability as well, right? Yeah, and I'll stop there. See if there's any questions.
Well, thank you, Ashby. Ashby, sorry. Clearly haven't had enough coffee this morning, Ashley. Yeah, there's a couple of hands up. Karen has her hand up.
I do. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your work. I am. I mentioned in the chat earlier, but I work with Root and Rebound out in Oakland. It does a lot of like reentry work, and I'm actually a master's of public health and environmental health sciences. So this is like very much at the intersection. I wanted to ask about your Callan virus screen findings because obviously like that's a massive tool used in a lot of like EJ work. So why can't is there a reason why they're like left out of the census tract level data, even though they can just extrapolate the surrounding conditions to include the prison, or it like, or is this a situation with like the boundaries of the, like why is it not just being a part of the census tract? Like what's the legal, I don't know if legality is the right word, but like, or maybe politics.
Yeah, we found that, yeah, it was more so, I think the standards that it already exists of how that Cal Enviro screen operates, how what it looks at. We just saw that it didn't factor for prisons for whatever reason. I'm happy to like connect you with our colleagues that were at UCLA that can dig more into that, because it is also like looking at the other environmental justice boards and different entities in the state that look at climate change, making sure that they're also factoring in our prisons, incarcerated people. But yeah, I'll share my email in the chat as well. We can definitely connect more on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack has his hand up. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, great presentation. I'm interested. We in CEMTF, we're always talking about policy changes. So I really thank you for putting in all these policy recommendations. And the question is, well, how are you doing with that? Do we have any legislators that have picked these things up, or is there some chance of actually implementing some of these policies?
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for your question. Thank you, Jack, for that as well. Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like we are right now, like, kind of talking and, talking with different legislators to get them to push this forward. Some things have gotten some traction. We've gotten like interest from legislators that we work with on just making climate change a priority in relation to our prisons. But yeah, nothing that is in the legislature right now or this session. But I'm happy to keep you updated as we, do more advocacy around at the state capitol for it.
Just as a follow-up, a couple of the speakers have talked about the changing climate, so to speak, in terms of people wanting more imprisonment and, that kind of thing. So like some of your recommendations are going counter to that. So do you have any comments on about all these sort of lock them up mentality that's coming out in recent years?
Yeah, that is something we are like really dealing with seriously, like dealing with a lot, just responding to a lot of policies, that are kind of for more prisons and more incarceration. Um, and we're fighting back against that. But I feel like on the climate, on with the climate aspect, um, we're kind of just trying to get this report and get these findings out to as many folks as possible and just show, again, bring awareness, but also like change the narrative as well, right? Feel like that's a big part of what EBC is trying to do, is change the narrative around how incarcerated folks are viewed, how prisons are viewed, that prisons, are not, they're set up to, keep people locked up, and they're not set up to, to keep people safe. They're set up to just keep people locked up and to really like damper folks' spirit as well. I feel like the institution of prison itself and the culture inside prisons is, it can be very discouraging. But what's really inspiring for me in fighting against those narratives around like keeping people locked up, and why we should continue doing that is, what helps me fight back against that is connecting with our incarcerated like colleagues that we've connected with over the years, like Juan. And so, yeah, they just have so much inspiration and so much motivation to continue doing their work, even though they are, you know, behind bars right now. Yeah, Glenn.
Yeah,
Okay, are you calling on my question? I'm wondering
yeah,
about our local
can the
cent.
next questions be really quick because we're running past time now, and I just want to make sure we're on time for our next speaker. But go ahead quickly. Thank you.
Just a quick question about Santa Rita Jail, which is the Alameda County Jail, and the Babu findings were pretty dire. Do you have any connections with that local situation that's obviously still really bad?
Yes, we actually, yeah, we're part of a coalition of folks, a coalition of so many amazing groups fighting against that Babu settlement and really trying to stop the expansion of Santa Rita Jail. I'm happy to connect with you. Was it Glenn? Happy to connect with you offline to share more and, you know, kind of keep you involved in like any advocacy we're doing around that. There's a lot of great groups. One of them is, I know Anti-Police Terror Project is one that's doing a lot of great work locally, and Restore Oakland.
Great. Well, Joyce, I think you're going to have to hold on to your question for we were going to take a break, but we're kind of running behind now, and I know that the our honorable Madam Alameda County DA is going to be on in 20 minutes. So if you need to take a break, you can take a break and come right back. But I think we're just going to continue on. Karis, if you want to introduce our next speaker. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And Ashley, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And if you send me your slides, we'll include that as well as the nice video that you sent in the when we send out the recording to all the registrants. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. That was great.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley. That was amazing. I loved listening to that. But hello. Up next, I'm excited to welcome James Birch, Deputy Director of the Anti-Police Terror Project, to speak on local police budgets' impact on environmental justice initiatives. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thank you all so much. Shout out to Ashley, shout out to Ella Baker Center, shout out to the amazing work that they're doing. It's always inspiring to see and heartwarming to see a comrade spreading the word. The time is limited and I talk, I digress a lot, so I'm going to try to get right into this. Can y'all see this presentation? Am I sharing my? No, there we go. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see?
Yeah,
Okay,
you're good. You're good.
great.
And if we'll stop you when we're ready, but just keep it, you take your time. I don't want to rush.
Okay, right on. Today I'm here to talk about local police budgets and the environment and why this is important. And I thought it would be helpful to folks in this room is because our goal at APTP and the goal of the defund campaign that we've been running since 2016 has been to make sure that folks understand that any money raised through taxes, raised through initiatives that folks want to spend on issue areas that they're passionate about, unfortunately, that money currently goes to the police department, right? And so when we talk about environmental justice and the relationship between the environment and the police budget, what we're hoping to get people to understand is that all the things that you all in your understanding of the environment know we need to do locally or at the state level to improve the environment. Unfortunately, we've created a scenario where so much money goes to the police that we can't possibly fund the things that you're asking for, right? And so when we talk about defunding the police, what we're really talking about is the fact that a lot of the money that we need for the environment, for, well, let me pop to these slides. Any of the money that we want for the initiatives that we're talking about has been slowly over time soaked up by the increasing amount of law enforcement agencies and through their officer associations and the political power that they have, complicit politicians will just continue to allow them to gain more and more and more and more. And so here is a look at police spending in cities across the country. Please note that since we created this slide deck, Oakland's police budget has gone up to $360 million, but I hope you're getting the idea, right? And this is the police budget related to the budgets of other departments in the city of Oakland. And I want y'all to understand that these numbers are very similar to the numbers that you'll find in any major city across the country, right? Nearly half, 40%, 40 to 60% of the money is going to go to law enforcement. If you're lucky, you live in a city with maybe 30%, right? And the rest of the departments are going to be scrambling for money, right? Right. And so this is a problem that we can track, fortunately, right? This is something that started with the 94 crime bill, right? For those of you who are familiar with the 94 crime bill passed under Clinton, strongly supported by Joe Biden, right? The 94 crime bill basically said, hey, local cities, counties, right? If you want the federal government to support you with additional funding for police, there's some criteria that you need to meet, right? You need to have certain policies, certain carceral policies in place, and you need to have certain investments that you're making locally on law enforcement, right? And if you satisfy these conditions, we'll give you a big pot of money, right? So as you can see, that happened in 94, right? You can track, right, how it just led to this explosion in police spending, right? And even though we've debunked the theories that in the 90s, the war on crime made popular, right? This is kind of like what's happening underneath the surface is that, politicians don't want to talk about it because it's not politically popular. Again, it's kind of an untenable situation for them. All the money's getting soaked up by police, but they don't want to look like they're against the police because you'll just get voted out, right? And so you just see this number go up and up and up and up and up because no one really wants to deal with it. And again, we see the result in cities across the country is that other departments, right, get, nickels, right, compared to what the police get and aren't able to properly do their jobs. And we could do a whole nother presentation on the vacancy rates within the departments even that we're talking about. So you can see Parks and Rec have 6% of the budget, but really, maybe they only have 70% of the jobs under Parks and Rec are filled. And so they're really only getting, 4% ultimately. And the money that's saved by not having those positions filled is funneled to the police anyway in something called salary savings, right? So again, police getting everything, everyone else really struggling, right? When it comes to their budgets, right? And in addition, in cities across the country, usually I don't want to digress too far, but it's important to understand that, like, again, this is happening in cities across the state and the country, right? The numbers are really wacky due to contract exploitation by the police officer associations, right? They operate under, at least in California, there's like one or two law firms, right, that do all of these negotiations across the state, right? So they're repeat players in the game. This is all they do. And they're negotiating against like a city administrator or a city councilor or a mayor who might see this contract once every 3 years and not have time to think about it, right? And the result is the contracts are just rife with exploitation, right? You can see the numbers on the screen. Are we really living in a system where someone's supposed to make $157,000 salary and then walk home with $377,000 in overtime? Like that's a joke, right? And the numbers are like that across the board in the city of Oakland. right? It's just an absolute joke when you look at the numbers our police are walking home with, right? They're walking home with 600,000, you know, like 500,000 in salary, total salary, and then another 150,000. So their total compensation package is 650,000, right? And it's not viable, right? It's not viable. You can't have a city budget that will ever make sense if one group of employees is allowed to just absolutely jack the budget like the police are allowed to do. And again, if you go against them, you hate police. You hate police and you love criminals, and you should never be a politician ever again, right? And they'll get you voted out. Imagine if all the police decided they wanted you out right now in 2024 and they started campaigning against you and saying that you were bad for public safety. And if they vote for you as a vote for crime, it's over. It's like over for you, right? And they rely on that, and so no one will go against them in the contract negotiations, which leads to, you know, gross abuses like you see here and you see across the state and the country. It's particularly bad in Oakland, particularly bad. So these numbers are like kind of, you know, cartoonish, right, compared to what you'll see in other, but it's not, but it's the same game, right? The police lobby's goal is to push it as far as they can and get as much money and exploitation as possible. And like, if your city's not going to do something about it, then you're just going to get absolutely run, right? For this year, we're at 35 million in unauthorized overtime over this year. And again, it's not, when they say overtime, they don't mean like you're working long extra hours after shifts. There's loopholes in the contract that say you get overtime hours for doing normal work under certain conditions, right? It's called compensation time is one of the examples. And you just get you get time and a half for just going to your normal shift. Because technically, I don't want to, again, I'll talk about that for like an hour. But it's where all of our money goes. And there's several audits that our city auditor have done and said, this is a terrible practice. It shouldn't be done. But still, the next time the contract's up, no changes, right? Right? Because, you know, again, it's the political reality. Okay, so yeah, we talked about the cartoon numbers here. Here we go. Here's some of our big winners for cops here, big losers really, but winning when it comes to taking our money home. And you can see I put at the bottom, I put the officer number 20 and 25, so you know it's not just like the grimiest cops who are getting away with this. This is like going down the chain, you know. And if you go on Transparent California, you can look at the salaries in the city of Oakland for police, and you'll see like the, you know, the 50th, 100th ranked off. They're still absolutely raking, right? You know, and not only is the money that they're coming home with out of pot, it's just out of control. It's just not the way any system is supposed to run, right? And so, you know, we at APTP, you know, we are very radical in our positions on policing, right? But we think everyone, the reason that I'm giving this presentation right now when we're talking about this like this is everyone should be able to agree and understand like how out of pocket this is, right? It doesn't make any sense, right? And all the money that we're supposed to be having for you know, libraries, for supporting our unhoused communities and getting them housed, for remediation of our land, for protecting, you know, vital resources in our communities, protecting our, you know, whatever it is that you're on about, right? The money's not going to be there if it's being thrown away in this fashion, right? And so we really can't do any of the things that we would want to do as a society to keep people healthy, housed, and really improve public safety in like in a legitimate way. Okay. So we're paying police all of this money, right? What are they doing with their time, right? We could go really far into this, but suffice it to say, police pretend that they're spending all of their time chasing down violent crime, right? What we call violent crime. That's what they're saying that they're spending. It's not true, right? As you can see in this study by several former cops commissioned for the New York Times, police are spending, you know, 4% of their time on violent crime, right? And really, you know, usually a third of their time on non-violent, non-criminal activity, right? I mean, you know, we all have different definitions of these words. You know, I don't like the word crime in general, but like, you know, for the purposes of this conversation, non-violent, non-criminal activity, right, is what they're spending a third of their time on. So I just say this because we all hear the police say, hey, we're so under-resourced, we need more money, we can't possibly do all of. No, it's a big grift, right? It's a big grift. It's really important that we understand that. Like, there's different opinions that everyone might have on what police should be doing, sure, right? But one thing that we should all be on the same page on is nobody agrees with what they're doing right now. People just don't know about it, right? They do have such a strong PR machine that people think that cops are like, dodging bullets and running it. That will never happen to your normal cop, right? Your normal cop will never be in an instance where they're in a situation where they have to even pull their weapon, right? The vast, vast, vast majority of law enforcement officers. But that doesn't fit the story that gets them the budget that allows them to continue on the way that they're going. Okay. And the last thing I want to say on policing before turning to the intersection of policing and the environment is even by their own metrics, police aren't doing the job that we hope that they should, they're paid to do, right? Police are supposed to be, by folks' metrics, police are supposed to find people who committed certain acts and hold them accountable via a carceral system, right? And you can look here at the percentages, the percentage rates at how successfully they're doing that. And you can look at the rates for larceny at 1%. 1% of people who commit larcenies are held accountable in our criminal justice system. 0.4% for auto theft, right? 1.4% for burglary. And again, the police are saying we need more money to go catch the people doing these things, right? And I bring this up just because it's just not true. It's just not true, right? And these numbers are reflected across the country. CJ did a report on clearance rates, I think like a month or two ago, that look at this across the state of California and the decline in clearance rates over the last several months. And so it's just really important for people to, the purpose of this conversation that I'm having right now is we're trying to pop the bubble that justifies the expenditure of $400 million per year in the city of Oakland, for example, right? Because what if that number was 200 million and 200 million more dollars could go to the type of projects we're talking about, which would mean, let's say 30 to $40 million per year for environmental projects. What could we do? What difference could we make? Of course, it's not going to solve all the problems, but what problems could it start to address? Right? Again, if we look at the numbers on the right side of this equation here, they're all too small, right? They're all too small, right? And the intersection of this conversation with the fight for environmental justice and for climate justice is we need all of the dollars that we can get locally to participate in this fight, right? We need it at the local level, we need it at the county level, we need it at the state level, right? All of the dollars that we can possibly put together, right? But we're not going to have those dollars if we're fighting with all of the other people on the right side of this equation, right? Right? Climate justice is pitted against fighting the housing crisis, and pitted against funding our youth development programs, and pitted against creating traffic calming projects and supporting our roadways, right? So if you're in a budget fight, you're in those rooms, all of the folks on the left are like vying for the same pot of money because the police just get theirs first, right? This has to go to the police. Now let's figure out what we're doing with whatever's left, right? Which is just absolutely flies in the face of any serious analysis of improving public safety or any other metrics through which you want to evaluate society. Right? I bring this up because people think, some people still think, yeah, I understand everything you're saying, James, but we got to be safe. We need the police, right? So I'm like, what safety are they providing you? What safety are they providing you if we're looking at the clearance rates and we're looking how they're choosing to spend their time, right? And we're not seeing numbers that even mean by their definition of safety that they're doing their job, right? Right? Like a couple examples of how am I doing on time? I'm doing terrible on time. I could stop now and we could do questions, Cheryl, if you want a couple questions.
You're okay. Pamela's not here yet, so just keep it going because hopefully she'll show up. But it's been an interesting morning, so go ahead.
I feel like every day is interesting for Pamela Price at this point.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so what here, what are some examples at the intersection of public safety and environmental and climate justice, right? The best thing about being a policy advocate in 2024 is there's so much research and data about brilliant programs people have run across the country at these intersections. Here are a couple examples of cities where they've chosen to take vacant lots in inner cities and incentivize. I think in Flint they incentivize youth groups or youth to invest their time and resources in them, and they stipend them out for taking care of them. Right. So take this abandoned lot and turn it into a community garden. Right. And the city will pay you to do that. Right. And so it gives a job to a local member of the community. And then if the job is completed and the community garden is put in place, then that vacant lot becomes much safer. Right? That whole area becomes safer. Why? There's plenty of reasons. Foot traffic, lighting, right? Like they're being, the blah, 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 blah. But like, I think the point is that so many cities, so many cities have been experimenting with programs of this type, right? What would happen if we remediated this land, right, and made it suitable for use and made a housing development on it, right? What would happen if we there's countless ways you can experiment to spend the money, but again, those are experiments that only happen if the money's there, right? And then on the other side of things, right? Even if you do set aside money for an environmental concern, for Parks and Rec, for issues that we're concerned about, you have to make sure to participate in implementation as well, because the police will continue to try to grab that money, even if it's earmarked for something else. This is an example that happened in Oakland a couple of years ago, where the people voted on Measure Q, right, to provide support for our unhoused communities and to provide resources for our local parks and trails, right? And then what we found out the administration was trying to do was give that money to the cops, right? They were trying to designate a unit, the homelessness outreach unit, to qualify them under Measure Q, and then just give $1 million of those dollars to law enforcement, right? Again, on top of all the money that you see coming through all these different ways to lead them to over $400 million a year, right? And so just cautioning folks who see this presentation and are like, yeah, we really need to fight for more money that can't be gobbled up by law enforcement. Because a lot of times when I give this talk, folks are like, okay, we need more ballot measures or money that's specifically earmarked or outside of the general fund process to go to certain things, but we got to watch out for those dollars too, because they are also under threat. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, because I think it's again another interesting intersection of public safety and environmental justice, is we're really improving our understanding of how traffic calming projects in the cities can reduce. Oakland had 33 deaths, I believe it was, in 2023 to pedestrian violence or to traffic violence. And so when we improve these neighborhoods, there's a real opportunity for folks who are interested in continuing to make our city more green to engage in these processes, because there's a lot of data on how you can combine traffic calming projects and environmental infrastructure projects to both improve the quality of the air in certain areas of the city while working on the roadways as well. But again, because I can't help but say it over and over again, the only way any of this is ever going to happen is if we can take the money from the cops, because they have it all, The end.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I don't see the Madam District Attorney Pamela Price has entered the room yet. So if anybody has a question for James, that'll be great. But also we missed this morning Minister King, and he is now here. So we could navigate to that if nobody has questions. But that was a great presentation. And, it's just incredible how much, there was always like defund the police, but actually their budgets increased exponentially. So that never happened. And that's just a myth. It was a great idea, but it still needs to happen clearly. And now I just noticed, like yesterday or the other day on Racist Next Door, how BPD had an enforcement thing where they were just giving out regular tickets, but it was like police used to always be like parked, if you went speeding by, you'd get a ticket. There wasn't like a big thing that they would announce they're gonna be enforcing, and they got extra money from a grant to do this. It's just like unbelievable to me. So anyway, thank you so much. I don't see any hands raised. So thank you, James. That was very, very informative. And we know we do need to reallocate those police funds to environmental issues. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Look forward
Oh,
to
you're
collaborating
quite
with you all in the
welcome.
future. I'll leave my email in the chat.
Thank you so much. Minister King, would you like to take a few minutes until, and if our Alameda County District Attorney arrives? And then I'll have to cut you off, but go for
Greetings,
it. Thank you
everyone.
so much for being here.
Greetings, everyone. First, I want to apologize for being late. I've been having some technical issues here, but I just want to kind of like piggyback on what Conrad James was saying earlier, for as the work that's being done through the cop. I want to say Cop City now because it's a whole lot going on right now, from Atlanta to California to the state. So inside and out, you see people get this money where inmate welfare funds, right? And they place these funds into the type of programs that they see fit. And when I think about the people out here in the community, a lot of times we don't have the information of what's going in and what's going out for us. When we talk about the judges who made multiple rulings that subjecting incarcerated people to extreme temperature is unconstitutional, but no one is upholding that ruling, holding them, the state and government agents acting under the color of law, responsible. So we come up with these concepts from 2011, 2013. We had a hunger strike against prison conditions, right? You got men, women, and youth that was up in solitary confinement, ASEG, under these extreme heat conditions. And then when we complain, they fella refuse to give you a towel, or they say, okay, you got a loaner from a fan that's from another inmate who was considered contraband. There's no real alternative. So again, you get the families, you get the MAC reps. The MAC reps are delegates on the behalf of the incarcerated class, for those that don't know. So, and then you get these principled thinkers that re-enter into society, particularly a lot of the elders who was freedom fighters inside, and they come up with these concepts of the strategic community release board, and we centralize people around these concepts, and then we go back inside and do these studies on the present prison conditions. What's different from 10 to 15 years ago, since the hunger strike, since we resist the prison conditions? Nothing changed. So they've been taking this money and running a Ponzi scheme inside and out. And the people is looking like, okay, we paying our taxes for what? And we talk about reform, we talk about rehabilitation, but it's an old statement, the journey to freedom begins from within. There's no real rehabilitation. So what we have to do is come up with feasible action items to address this issue head on. And one of the things that California Prison Focus has been doing for 47 years is representing those who've been subjected to these type of conditions, solitary confinement, or without resources or whatnot. And we go in there, we pull out these principal thinkers, and we get an update on their present conditions. We ask them what's been going on before, during, and after solitary confinement, what's going on in general population. So I'm all about action items. If we could challenge some of these people that's getting budgets for these programs to go and talk to the people that's still doing the work, some of the jailhouse lawyers, some of the men and women that's being punished or subjected to reprisal for speaking out. I think that's what this group of people, of men and women, we should all do is come up with some feasible action items and bolster it through social media, bolster the data, take it to Sacramento and say, hold on, we didn't have enough. We're tired of talk. Let's see action. So that's what I hear. And I apologize if I was long-winded.
No worries. Thank you so much, Minister King. You're amazing. And you can listen to Prison Focus on KPOO 89.5, the only Black radio station in the Bay Area. And thank you again, Minister King X. And I am very happy and honored and humbled to introduce our next speaker, Madam Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price. Thank you for being here, Pamela.
Of course. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's going well. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity once again to participate. You all are certainly on the front lines of this issue around the climate emergency, and connecting that to criminal justice reform is absolutely critical, as we too often find ourselves advocating in silos. And I think all of the folks here know how dysfunctional that can be, has been. And so I'm always happy to receive the request from you, Shura, and to honor that request. And to just come in and as much as I could. Unfortunately, today I couldn't listen as much as I'd like to. I'm actually traveling, but I wanted to certainly respect that you all are doing the work and have a few words about the work that my office is doing, which I'm very proud of from our perspective, from the opportunities that we have to address the climate emergency, as well as, you know, the work that we're doing collaboratively at the same time in criminal justice reform. As all of you know, I am the first non-anointed, non-appointed elected district attorney in Alameda County in 100 years. And that means if you go back to Earl Warren, who was appointed by the Board of Supervisors in 1925 and left this office in 1937, every DA since then, including Earl Warren, was appointed. The one exception was his chief deputy, Ralph Hoyt, who ran in 1937 and was elected, but he was the chief deputy. So he really was the appointed one, the anointed one, as we say. But all the rest have been appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So we are in a very dynamic time and a historic time to have an elected district attorney in Alameda County. And, you know, obviously I have to acknowledge that there are some people that don't agree with democracy, that think that some people made a mistake when they voted for me. And so therefore they want to have a do-over, right? And you don't get to have a do-over just because you have the money. So we're dealing with that. You know, as of yesterday, they failed their first test. So we can certainly celebrate that and appreciate that the people of Alameda County are actually going to continue to have a voice in what happens in our criminal justice system. Part of what happens in the criminal justice system is, in fact, happening around the way that corporations are poisoning our environment and are undermining the quality of life, particularly around environmental racism. We have a Consumer Justice Bureau, which was in existence when I got there. It was sorely understaffed and needed some direction, as new direction, I should say, and certainly some new energy around how they do their work. And so we've been very busy in the first year rebuilding that unit. I think they were down to like, I think 16 lawyers when we got there. They're now up to about 24. My goal is to get 25 lawyers, and they're doing the work. We just had a case recently where a deputy was able to resolve the case in 5 months. We hired him 5 months ago. He took the case, he got it done. Okay. The case had been there for 5 years. So that's the kind of thing we're doing. We had a major settlement against Kaiser last year, $49 million settlement for improper disposal of patient records as well as medical waste. And that means they're dumping stuff in our communities, right? And you know where they're dumping it, right? And that case had also been going on and on and on for years. My team got in there and they worked with other folks as well. And, you know, the lead agency was actually the AG's office. But we settled that case with a $49 million payment by Kaiser that is going to go to in cleaning up some environmental spaces, and as well as having better safeguards to ensure that they're not dumping body parts and waste, medical waste, into our communities. We also have had a number of settlements that our Consumer Justice Bureau has been litigating and holding people accountable for polluting our community. And another medical waste case I know we settled earlier this year. You know, we are ramping up our investigation of Schnitzer Steel in West Oakland, which has had some very troubling history of environmental racism, as well as a failure to comply with the restrictions and the safeguards that were built in from prior settlements. We're monitoring that very closely and looking into making sure that there are no more explosions, okay, in the middle of a residential area that we all know as West Oakland, right? So that's the work that the Consumer Justice Bureau does that doesn't get heralded often and people don't appreciate. These are both civil lawyers as well as criminal lawyers. And this week is Consumer Justice Awareness Week. And so we are celebrating that in our office as well as with our community. If you go to our YouTube today, we're releasing a video that highlights the work that that team is doing and that they've been able to do, and how they're working together and moving forward, you know, to protect and do our part to protect the environment for everyone who lives, works, and plays in Alameda County. So that's a very important part of our work. I mean, 25 lawyers, inspectors, staff. It's a big section in my office, and I've invested in it, and I'm going to continue to invest in it fully. And one of the things we're looking to do to expand the areas and the directions, you know, certainly dealing with environmental racism, dealing with it with respect to landlord-tenant activities and holding some of the landlords accountable. We're about to enter into a partnership with the City of Alameda's City Attorney's Office to do a major case around some landlord issues, and more of that to come. I can't speak to all of that coming, but more of it to come. So we are definitely mindful of the needs of the community and receptive to it in ways that we know this office has not been in the past. Obviously, I was elected on a platform of criminal justice reform, and we are doing that as well. We are not charging juveniles as adults willy-nilly. We are not charging people with life without the possibility of parole. We are working with the courts to address those cases where the death penalty has been imposed under prior administrations, and those cases are coming back to us. We are implementing the Racial Justice Act. We are blessed to have the leadership of Damaris Evans, who is a pioneer both in the restorative justice community as well as the racial justice community. And we just finished training in Black History Month. We did across the board mandatory training of all of our employees on the Racial Justice Act. And if You don't, for those who aren't familiar with it, the legislature passed an act that says any part of the criminal justice system that is infected or impacted by racism, the district attorney has an obligation to look at that and make sure that the prosecution of the case is not infected or does not result from that. And we're responsible not only for the actions of the prosecutors in my office, we're responsible to look at and make sure that a judge doesn't act out of racial bias, that a juror doesn't act out of racial bias, that if the police have done something, racial profiling or, arrested someone in connection and race played a role, we're responsible for that. We are accountable for that in the prosecution. And so it's an across the board legislative mandate to every actor in the criminal justice system, my lawyers, defense lawyers, like I say, judges, jurors, clerks, court personnel, police personnel. If anybody displays or demonstrates racism in the prosecution of an individual, we have a duty to address that. And that may not mean that the case is going to get dismissed. We know that that's not necessarily the remedy, but certainly my responsibility, which I take very seriously, is to make sure that everyone receives a fair and equitable hearing and service in the criminal justice system, whether you are a victim or a defendant or a witness or a family member of someone. And that's the mantra that we are impressing, the culture change that we are in the process of making. It doesn't happen overnight. 14 months is not enough time to get this done. 2 months was not enough time to get it done. But I am excited to serve as a district attorney and to let you know that we are moving in the right direction. And I really appreciate that the community understands it and appreciates it and will stand with me. For those of you who heard me as I was running for this office, I said over and over again, do not send me into the DA's office and think that, okay, Pamela, we leaving you at the front door. You got it, girl. Do it. We know you can do it. Don't, that's not how we roll it. I need the whole community to be engaged in this transition and transformation, because it's really what we are about, is transforming our broken justice system so that it really does take care of everyone and our whole community. So thank you all for being on the journey with us and for allowing me to come and have a few words this morning. And, certainly for the work that you're doing and for gathering consistently and annually and in when it's not annual. I know y'all doing the work, and that's so important because it makes a difference. We are all accountable for how we hold our community and how we take care of each other and how we take care of our community. And I'll say to you what I often say, our children are watching.
Yes.
How important that is. Our children are watching. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And good luck with the program. I hope everything goes well and you'll continue to be guided and to do the work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamela Price. That's been amazing. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
All right. Take
All
care,
right.
you guys. Have a great program.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And now we're going to move on to Karis is going to introduce Carrie.
Thank you so much, Madame Pamela. Our next speaker is Carrie Peng Chen, Director of Innovation and Strategy and Planning of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. Thank you so much. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thanks. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to just get our slides going. As noted, I'm Carrie, Director of Innovation Strategy and Planning. And I just wanted to start off with a picture I took just about a little over an hour ago in Lafayette, so that you can really see the boots on the ground and be inspired. A lot of our work is about planting the seed for folks to imagine what this work that we do looks like. So on your left are our 24 participants in our current training program, our career training program based in Oakland. And we are having a field training day over in Lafayette through a partnership with UC Berkeley and Berkeley Forest. And they're doing a field day of training with a fuels crew and engine crew from East Bay Regional Parks District. And we hosted one of the fuels crew members from East Bay Regional Parks District for basic firefighter training with us this past week. And so I just wanted to, I thought a picture will give you all a sense of what we do. But as we go further into the presentation, you'll learn a little bit more about where our work fits into the conversation that you've all had this morning. So we'll start quickly with this picture. I think you all know that climate change is upon us. And what I hope we all can agree is that wildfires are growing in both frequency and severity. It's requiring our communities to invest both in fire prevention and fire suppression work so that we can manage our lands and care for the environment. That's a big part of our work. The other big part of our work is really around workforce, because we need the bodies and the people to take on that work. And there's a really incredible report that the Nature Conservancy put out last year called Building California's Forest Resilience Workforce. And if you'll see on this chart, you'll notice that currently the estimated shortfall of federal, state, and forest restoration workers in California is somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people. And that number is expected to more than double in the next 5 years. And this really impacts the kind of work and the growing amount of fuels management and fire suppression and reforestation work that is being done by the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, the Bureau of Land Management, and then also many of our local parks and open space districts and the private contractors that many of them also work with. And this is where FFRP fits in. We really sit as an organization at the intersection of climate, workforce, and justice. Our organization is really focused on supporting those folks who have been justice impacted, and especially those out of fire camp in pursuing careers in wildland firefighting and forestry careers. And so I just wanted to really take a step back with you all to ground us in some numbers around what the prospects look like for job seekers with records. So one of the things, these are some stats from JFF Center for Justice and Economic Advancement, one of our partners in this work. And you'll see that they note that 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal record, and there's over 6 million Californians that also have a criminal record. And when you look at those numbers and consider that about more than 90% of US employers conduct criminal background checks, most of which won't hire someone if a record is revealed, these create real challenges for people who want to move on with their lives upon release and have a chance at opportunity to really seek meaningful work in our communities. Here in California, we are really focused on folks who are a subsect of our population that is incarcerated. And those are the folks who are incarcerated in California's fire camps. And I've included some information just as background for you all to get familiar with what these fire camps are all about. There's about 35 fire camps throughout California. Here's a map on the side. 2 of these fire camps are specifically for women in Malibu and Puerto La Cruz. And there's also an 18-month Ventura Training Center program that is run for formerly incarcerated firefighters, where it's a residential-based program. The camps are operated by CDCR in cooperation with CAL FIRE and the LA County Fire Department, who provide the training. And back in 2015, it was estimated about 30 to 40% of California's wildland firefighters were state prison inmates, typically making about $2 per day in the program and $2 an hour when they were on the fire line. By 2019, they estimated about 3,700 inmates worked in fire camps, according to CDCR. So this is where FFRP's story really began. Our two co-founders, Brandon Smith and Royal Ramey, met at Bautista Conservation Camp when they were incarcerated. And that's where they first fell in love with wildland firefighting. And you'll often hear these stories from many of these thousands of people in our communities who've been incarcerated in the fire camps. For many of them, they'd never imagined that wildland firefighting or even a forestry career was something that they would be interested in. For so many of them, especially those from urban communities, they never really had opportunities to spend a lot of time outdoors and really embrace camping or understand what that life might be like. It's hard work. It's challenging work. It's I know that there were some conversation by the Ella Baker Center that Ashley did earlier to kind of give people a sense of, exposure that incarcerated individuals may have while they're in camp. And these are the folks who are actually right there on the front line, literally on the fire line, creating the fuels breaks to protect our communities. So it's challenging work, but it's also incredibly meaningful. For so many of them, they find that the physical challenge, the sense of crew cohesion, and the opportunity to feel like they're really making a meaningful impact on local communities and welcomed with "Thank you, firefighter" signs after a hard day's work on the fire line is what leaves them inspired and hoping to do more upon release. So for Brandon and Royal, when they were released back in 2012, they were among the fortunate ones who had both their family and friends, as well as local community organizations, really helping them to figure out how they could navigate a pathway back into these forestry and fire careers upon release. And it really took the opportunity to get their certifications on their own, find the classes in local community colleges, and ultimately get the mentorship and support of Chief Betty Ash, who is one of few Black fire chiefs at the San Bernardino National Forest, who hired them to join in the work. And they fell in love with the work and wanted to figure out how they could help more people continue down this pathway. And this is where our story continued. Brandon and Royal decided to turn what started off as just conversations with other folks who wanted to follow their same pathway into a full-blown organization. So we incorporated in 2018, and we're based down in Southern California, and then we moved up to expand and open a program here in the Bay Area in 2022. And our focus is opening up these pathways, really helping more people to know about this work as an option for them to pursue, and that there's a real need for them to continue to serve the community in these ways. So our career training program currently is an 8-week community-based cohort model. And I emphasize that because it allows us to base the program right here in the Bay Area, allowing people to remain with their families. They're here with us typically 8 to 5 every day when they're in training, and they receive a stipend while they're participating in the training. And they really develop a sense of crew cohesion and connection with one another. We focus on preparing them for meaningful careers and also learning the lifestyle of what it's like to be a wildland firefighter and forestry professionals, covering everything from physical conditioning to nutrition, but also making sure that they have the forestry, fire skills, as well as the knowledge, certificates, and mentorship for success. Mentorship for our program is really core to what we do, because our entire training team came out of a similar experience. They were all folks who came out of fire camp or were formerly incarcerated in other institutions throughout the state. And that really sets the tone and normalizes the experience for all of the folks in our training program, while also providing them with real life examples of what it takes to do this work, the kind of attitude and commitment that they need to make to their training in order to have a successful career. So we start really by making sure that we're giving them real training stipends. Often people will have to pay for their own CAL FIRE Academy or firefighter training programs at other local institutions. But in order to make sure that we're engaging as many folks that we're trying to reach for this program, training stipends are a big part of the work so that we can help them focus on training while they're with us. We also provide case management services to ensure that they have support in accessing reliable transportation, stable housing, healthcare services, and most importantly, legal services to help them with their path. These are some of the numbers from our work on expungement that we've done. At least this was in our first year. These numbers have actually grown a lot in even the second year. And I'm bringing this up because there was a very important bill that was passed a few years ago called AB 2147, which really allows people who were in fire camp to have the crimes that they had committed that led them to be in fire camp, they can have those expunged from their record. What we found is that because AB 2147 only applies to those crimes that led them to fire camp in the first place, there may still be other items on their record that they need additional assistance with. And we are so grateful to our legal services partners, as well as the local attorneys who really work through this process directly with all of our trainees to get them through this process. So how do we support Second Chances as an organization? We're really reaching about 1,000 people per year through our pre-release in-reach services. And that's really going in to the fire camps, meeting with folks, talking with re-entry organizations, going out to our local prisons as well, and really planting the seed for them, helping them to imagine what this opportunity can mean for them and how to really take advantage of any skills or programs that they might be getting and focus on that rehabilitation so that upon release, they can really access these opportunities. We're also focused on really emphasizing job readiness and transitional support for the folks that we work with, giving them opportunities to join us on our fire crew. We have our own Buffalo hand crew that will respond to fires. They can be called to a 14-day fire assignment and also assist with fuels management projects that we're hired to take on out in local communities. And then we provide a range of reentry support, job placement, and transitional employment for the folks that we work with. But a big goal that we have is really building that connection between employers that we work with in government as well as private agencies, and really helping them to see and value the workforce that we're training and building up in the community. This is a quick overview of our cohort 4 placements last year. We had a little over 40 folks who graduated from our programs in Southern California and the Bay Area last year. All of them went on to work during the fire season last summer. A little over 50% of them went to the U.S. Forest Service. About 17.5% went to CAL FIRE, 10% to the Bureau of Land Management on their hotshot crews, and then the remainder joined private fire agencies who often were supporting many of these larger government agencies. We're currently in our 5th cohort with our programs, again, rotating between Southern California and the Bay Area. And we do anticipate that we'll be graduating about 65 folks by the end of April. And again, we expect similar percentages in terms of how those folks will be distributed this fire season. So if you'd like to learn more about the work that we do, I just want to really highlight, especially since so many of you are based right here in the Bay Area, ABC7 Bay Area did a mini documentary about our very first cohort. It's called Forging Heroes, and it really follows the story of 3 of our trainees in that first cohort. And we also have many more articles and documentaries about the work on our website. And I'll share many of these links in the chat as well. And then I wanted to point out that we were given an opportunity to participate in the Living with Fire Design Challenge last year in partnership with the Underground Scholars Program at UC Berkeley. And we are also working with the Western Forest and Fire Initiative and the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. And IRLE, the UC Berkeley Institute for Research on Labor and Employment, was also a critical partner in supporting the research that we did. And so we have a website that really highlights the work that we did as part of that design challenge, and we'll also provide you with some more background. We're really appreciative to Wonder Labs for giving us the opportunity to bring these different students together with us as we continue to collect more information to really capture and tell our story, and then have more data to back up what we're doing. There's plenty to do. I see some questions and comments in the chat, so I'd like to get over to those, but just wanted to also share my contact information with all of you, and happy to follow up now with further questions. Oh, and I see Jessica, who is our intern and has always been super supportive of our work and part of the University of Michigan team that assisted us. So thank you to Jessica for also putting in the chat some of those links.
Thank you, Carrie. This is amazing, and it just gives folks an opportunity to have a career upon release. So that's amazing. We have a hand raised by 1405 is the last 4 digits of your number.
Hi,
If you want to unmute yourself. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hart from Berkeley, and I understand for fighters, I have a lower lifelong expectancy and greater health risks, particularly lung and respiratory problems plaguing them. What is a safety net for these firefighters?
And I just want to make sure I heard the question. So what I think I heard, what does this safety net look like for firefighters? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, yeah, they die sooner and are sick more, yes.
So I think if that's in terms of like the general firefighters and what support for their employment piece, I can explain the kind of safety net support that we try to provide for folks as they're moving from reentry out into professional firefighting. And so a lot of that is really with our case management support, looking at addressing a lot of mental health or trauma related issues that we want to make sure that they're prepared for, and to make sure that there aren't anything that's going to trigger them when they are out working on this professionally. We also want to make sure that economically and in terms of having things set in their own personal life all stable, so that they can focus on their professional roles as firefighters as well. That is where reliable transportation and stable housing is really critical for many of our folks coming out of incarceration. That requires really making sure that they can get their driver's license or get that back in place, save enough money to have a car and have insurance so that they can drive to some of these more distant locations to access them. And then while some of the seasonal firefighting positions do provide some housing, for many of them, knowing that they have a stable housing location to come back to when they're not working on a shift is also extremely important. So we really try to focus on meeting them where they're at, really looking at some of the practical needs that they have. There are, we often work with probation parole officers to see if we can leverage assistance for them with uniform stipends or transit passes as well. So we try to help them navigate different resources based on their needs to help them access these careers. I hope that helps provide a general sense of that support system.
Thank you, Carrie. This was an amazing presentation, and we'll send out your slides and those links to with the recording, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, and if I can just respond quickly to Tanya's question about the salary. Thank you. So I know that there was conversation earlier around the high cost of many of the police salaries because of overtime. And I will note that kind of similarly, the reason that many firefighters earn more money
the
is.
argument? What did I think of was deductible?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was for me. So many firefighters do get both overtime and hazard pay as part of working on the fire lines. These are pretty intense jobs, whereas structural fires and those who work locally, hopefully the fire's out within an hour or so or less. Wildland firefighters, it's not uncommon for them to be on full 14-day assignments. So typically it's about $15 to $21 an hour starting on a hand crew. Obviously that goes up as you have more experience. With the work that you're doing, they are paid at the same rate as other people. These are government jobs, so it's based on the pay scale that they have. It's not uncommon for many people to start in the $60,000 to $65,000 range, but for that to quickly go up as they have greater seniority and depending on how many fires they work on a season, for those that salary to quickly grow as well, because again of the overtime and hazard pay that's involved in the work. Hopefully that helps.
Well, thank you, Carrie. So this has been an amazing morning again for the Climate and Prison Industrial Complex. I know I learned a lot, and there's so much work that we could do in this realm. For one, whoops, I just muted myself. For one, we could get rid of the prison industrial complex. That would be a good start. But yeah, we can start to reallocate some of those police budgets. And it was really amazing to hear all the things that the Alameda County DA's office does in regards to the environment. So I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. I want to thank the amazing fellows, Natalie, Livy, Janelle, and Karis. Livy wasn't able to join us this morning, but she's been an amazing asset to us as well. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you to all our phenomenal speakers today, Karina, Malachi, Minister King X, Ashley, James, and the DA, Pamela Price, and Carrie. And I want to thank you all for being here and for your donations. And we must make sure that change happens. for our children's futures, and for 7 generations to come. So let's do what we can do to save our planet, abolish the prison industrial complex, stop the genocides around the world, and end apartheid, free all political prisoners here and abroad, and do what we can to change our footprint, not just our fossil fuel footprint, but to change how we live, ensure that we are not creating harm to the environment, Mother Earth, individuals, or our feathered or four-legged friends, and plant some trees, some flowers, and grow our food. But most importantly, we have to show love for ourselves, love for humanity, to our neighbors, and be loved and be in solidarity, and to unite to do all of the above. We have to end oppressions, corporate greed, and yes, we must free Palestine. So thank you again for being here today. And thank you to Karina and Jack, who help keep these virtual summit series going. And, you know, we're in our 5th year. We had our 5th anniversary, February 9th. So we're happy about that. And we're going to try to have an event in person, hopefully in May, but stay tuned for that. And then also, I just wanted to give a couple announcements. Next Wednesday is our CEMTF general meeting, where we're going to have our amazing fellows present just a sneak peek of the work they've been doing this year on the Alameda County Climate Scorecard. They've changed it a little bit, and they're just going to give you a sneak peek at Wednesday's meeting, and also a final presentation will be at the May meeting. So stay tuned for that. Join us. And then also on April 6th, I'm also part of Mobilize Berkeley, which is the Student Environmental Resource Center at UC Berkeley, and the CEMTF. And we're having a climate community healing gathering at Civic Center Park. And you're all invited if you're in the Bay. And it's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we'll have music, speakers, tabling. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. This has been amazing. Again, thank you for being here, and do all that you can, and be in solidarity and in unity to save our planet and save ourselves. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Could we get your email, Cheryl?
Oh yeah, I can drop an email in the chat. It's
and somebody has to
CEMTF.
I'm not going to
okay.
copy it letter by letter.
Okay.
I'll copy the whole thing if you put it up there. Is there some way that someone's going to save the chat so that people can use whatever they want to off of it? I run my cursor over the whole chat and copy it and put it on my computer on a Word document.
I am saving the chat. I have saved the chat.
Great.
I'll save it again before I sign off.
Right.
And I'll take things out of it and add it to the follow-up email with the recording after once we get that recording. Rachel, you have your hand raised. I dropped the email in the chat.
Thank you so much. I had a larger point. I don't know if people want to take the time for me to mention it. I know you're winding.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much. I really appreciated everything. I was in your district when you were a West Berkeley councilwoman, so thank you so much for representation and great work. I just wanted to say that, one of the things that I think has been left out, although I think Malachi kind of talked about it very briefly, is that there are some very empowering programs that are preparing incarcerated individuals for the work associated with climate change and environmental justice inside of prisons. And we happen to run one of those programs called the Roots of Success program. And it is the only apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship program in the United States that's taught by incarcerated individuals to incarcerated individuals, that has the kind of industry recognized credentials that people need in order to prepare for living wage dignified jobs. And I would love to talk to anybody who's interested about that work, because we're part of a much larger network. And I think, San Quentin is certainly one of the places where there are empowering programs, and this is another one. And we should talk about those. They are very important to include in the conversation, which are not the things that are going wrong, but some of the things that are going right. And I think focusing on some of the things that are going right is important and inspiring. And of course, we want to shut all these facilities down, but in the meantime, it is important to offer empowering programming that prepares people for really good jobs and to address environmental injustices when they come home. So just really wanted to say that. And also thank you to all of my students who joined today from San Francisco State.
All right.
They're in my environmental.
Thank you.
Yeah, would just love to check in. And thanks so much for putting this on. It was very inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much. And if you want to send me an email, I drop my email in the chat. I'll try to, yeah, I drop my email in the chat, so you can send me an email and we could like to stay in touch and maybe have you present at some point in time.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
So
And
thank you.
Yeah. Bye, Austin.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, that's amazing. You never know like who's in. I noticed that today there were a lot of people that I didn't recognize the names. So I appreciate everyone for being here, and thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Stay healthy, be safe. We're still in COVID, so do what you got to do. Thank you so much. Yes, California Prison Cut Focus. That's an amazing show on KPOO on Thursdays, I think I'm not sure, 12 or 2. Anyway, check it out. Thank you, Minister King. Have a blessed day, y'all. Thank you.